Говорит и показывает Москва. В эфире программа Ushanka Show. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи. Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. My name is Sergey, and I was born in USSR. Меня зовут Сергей, я родился в Советском Союзе. So today will be a part 2 of my family story, a story of my paternal grandparents. Thank you so much for correction. That's a brand new word for me, paternal. I don't know why, but I never used it for the last 20 years. So there we go. It's just a quick reminder. So my grandfather, Trofim, was born in 1902 or maybe '03. And my grandmother, Ulyana, was born in 1905. So I'm guessing they got married somewhere around 1924 or maybe 1925. My father had no idea. As I mentioned, my grandparents managed to have a total of 9 kids, minus 2 children they lost. They were sick or whatever happened to them. So 2 kids they lost, and they managed to raise a total of 9 children. Their first child was Andrei, or as we say in Ukrainian, Andriy. He was born, I guess, around 1927. He never served in the military. My father said that he had really different length of the legs, so he was limping really bad. I remember that. And I don't know when or why, but he lost one of his fingers. So one of his hand always looked really kind of awkward. And I remember when you talk to him, your eyes are constantly getting attracted to his hand. Andrei ended up moving out of the village, and he worked all his life in Paninka paper factory. And he was the guy who brought us all the time bags and bags of different notepads and other paper products which he carried out. Remember that story about Nisuni from his factory? So that's kind of, I remember every time we have Uncle Andrei visiting us, he'll bring a big bag full of notepads and other cool stuff. Andrei was married despite his disability, and he had 2 daughters. Second child was Zina. She was born sometimes around 1930. So my dad said pretty much every 2-3 years they had another kid. She spent all her life in Karpovci, in the village, got married, and had a total of 4 kids. If you like to learn about Soviet Union, you probably should know that during the Stalin era, during the collectivization, they had extremely strict laws against stealing in the collective farms, stealing the grains from the fields, and Zina got in trouble. Sometime right after the war was over, so I would say 1946-47, so she was about 16-17, she got caught dragging we call it snop in Ukrainian, so that's like a big batch of wheat from the collective farm field. And she got sentenced to 10 years in the labor camps. That's how strict the rules were back then. 10 years for trying to feed your family. And I bet it wasn't her own idea to go in the middle of the night and trying to steal some wheat. At that time, they already had 7 kids. So probably mother sent her because everyone was hungry. And if you're familiar with Alexander Solzhenitsyn stories like One Day in Life of Ivan Denisovich or his famous Archipelago Gulag, 10 years in labor camps, it was pretty much close to a death sentence. But fortunately, during the war, my grandma Ulyana was hiding a Jewish lady and her kid in her house under that pitch, under the wood brick stove, while Germans were searching the village for any Jews. It sounds very brave, but also very stupid, because she had already 6 kids, and if Germans would find out that she's hiding a Jewish person, they would probably shot her too, and then you have 6 kids that have no mother and no father. But Grandma risked her life and saved the Jewish person, and that lady turned out to be a wife of some quite important local Soviet apparatchik, we could say that, some kind of manager. So grandma ran to that lady and begged for help, and I guess she got in touch with her husband. They pulled some strings, and they let Zina go. So Zina never got her 10-year labor camps. Her life was spared. The next kid was a daughter again named Nina, born sometimes around 1933. That's the lady that I don't have a photo of. And she ended up moving to Kiev. And all her life, she actually worked at the Kiev movie studio called Studia имени Alexandra Davzhenka. She was making different decorations for that movie studio. For many years, I wanted to go. She invited us to come and check it out. And unfortunately, I never had a chance to do that. Next kid was a son, Vladimir Volodya, born in 1936. He was exactly 10 years younger than my father, and they looked quite similar. It was pretty bizarre when they stood next to each other. I thought it was pretty kind of wild to see how similar they looked. Vladimir also moved to Kiev, capital of Ukraine, probably with Nina's help, and he worked all his life as an excavator operator, and he managed to make some extra money on the side, digging whatever needs to be dug for the private people for cash. So he actually managed to build pretty nice dacha, had a decent size apartment, and he had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. Next kid was another son, Yosip. This is really old-fashioned Ukrainian name. We don't have anyone, I don't think, using that name anymore. It's like Herb in America. He was born in 1938, lived all his life in Karpovtsi. The only kind of interesting detail about him, so there was another baby boy, Yosip, who died. So when they had this kid, mother picked the same name again, so which really kind of like not a good idea to give a new baby boy and same name as the baby boy just passed away, but that's what Yosip got. Next kid was a girl, Marusia or Maria, born in 1940. So that was the last kid number 6, born before World War II started. And she also lived all her life in the village in Karpovtsi, and she had 3 kids. So 1941, June 22nd, Germany attacked Soviet Union. And they moved rapidly through the western part of the Soviet Union, and they occupied Zhytomyr region probably in a month or 2. I'm planning to make a separate video story about my grandfather Trofim war adventures, we could say. I just want to mention right now that he somehow managed to dodge the Soviet draft, going to Red Army. My father sounded like he actually did it on purpose. My cousin, when I talked to him, said it was just because Germans moved in so quick. They just didn't have a chance to draft many people out of the village, and he already had 6 kids, so maybe that was the reason. But anyway, he didn't get drafted, and he lived under German occupation. And it sounds like their life was just business as usual, because in 1943 they had another kid. Sorry. So Pavel was born in 1943, so 2 years after war broke out. Now, Pavlo had a horrible accident when he was in his teen years. Apparently, they went to the forest to cut down some trees for the firewood, and there was the big oak tree. And when they cut it down, it got stuck with its branches in the other trees. And Pavlo was such a hot shot, he just grabbed a saw and climbed on that oak, started cutting branches to get the tree loosened. And then tree moved sharply. I guess branch broke that he was cutting, so he fell on the ground, and a tree crushed him and pinned him down, broke his back, crushed his taz, so that the part where your legs attached to your bone. So he was messed up really bad, and he always had a trouble walking, never got married, never had kid, and worked all his life in a savkhoz as a konyukh, so he took care of the horses in the village there. Pavlo was a very nice uncle. One time he gave me 10 rubles, which is huge amount of money in the Soviet Union, especially for a kid. I was probably, I don't know, about 14 or so. And he also gave me a present, a nice Nutria fur hat, which I always hated those hats, so I gave it to my dad. But that's what I remember about Pavlo, that out of nowhere he just, here you go, gave me 10 rubles present and a hat. After war was over, my family, my paternal family, was one of those rare lucky ones that the husband actually came home from the war. In 1944, when the Red Army came back, they actually drafted my grandpa into the Army service, but it's a separate video story. And I just heard that out of 100 men, only 3 came back from the war. So my dad was born in 1946, Nikolai Trofimovich, or Kolya, and born 1946, so he is the very first wave of so-called baby boomers. We didn't call them baby boomers in Soviet Union. I learned that term when I came to America, but he was the very first year of the baby boomers, 1946. He went to Army service. I already have videos about that. And after he came back from the Army service, he went to Kiev, and that's where he ended up working and living all his life. And the last kid number 9, was a girl named Oля, or Olga is the full name, born in 1949. So she was the youngest, and she was the favorite daughter of Grandma Uliana. She always was getting everything, more of everything, even house where my grandparents lived, even though Pavlo lived with them all his life. The house was inherited by Olga, and I was told after Pavlo passed away, she just sold that house to the neighbor. We have this large family, 9 kids, tons of siblings. I have a total of 19 siblings on that side, and no one wanted that house or didn't want to buy it from Olga, so she sold it. So we don't have that house anymore. Olga also moved to Kiev. She ended up marrying a Russian guy, like Russian guy. Like he had a strong accent. I don't remember from where he was in Russia, but picture, like real Texan, like we want to say is he's American, like has this accent, Texas accent. Well, that guy had really strong Russian accent. And I just remember that every time we met, he was really loud and had these interesting Russian sayings. And he was a driver. And he always drove that UAZ, Soviet SUV, so he had some money too. He had access to gasoline, and he could give people a ride, move things around, so he was doing okay. Okay, so this concludes part 2 of my family history, a story of my paternal grandparents. In my next video, I'll tell you how I almost died when I went to visit my grandparents as a baby, and then how we purchased an apartment in Kiev, Kooperativная kvartira, cooperative apartment, and how my mother got really mad at her relatives on my paternal side. Well, if you made it all the way to the end of this long and boring video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You probably won't mind to put a like below this video. I'll appreciate that too. I'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye. with my book American Diaries is available on Amazon.com, or shoot me an email if you would like to have a signed copy. Thank you. And if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new, interesting videos about the life in Soviet Union.